You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one on one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1179. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We want you to thrive. We want you to do well financially, that you got your logistics and operations and all those things put together correctly. But we also want you to love it. Sometimes we can focus so much on the business side that we lose sight of why we even went into therapy. Or we dig into the why we love therapy side so much that we forget about the business side. So we want to help you with both sides of the equation for running a practice. So I'm so excited to hang out with you guys today. I have identified as an extrovert, since I kind of learned that word. When I think about how I get energy, oftentimes it's talking to people. I mean, clearly, I do this 5 to 10, hours a week of just interviewing people, and I just love it. I follow my curiosity. It's always been like that. I've often said that, almost every single report card from elementary school said Joey talks to his neighbors too much. But this weekend, I went to an improv retreat, and many of you know that I've been involved with improv since probably 2018. And we brought this lady from LA into Northern Michigan. She taught 19 of us. She's been on like Bob's Burgers and Modern Family and Parks and Rec, and just this really talented woman. And we were doing tons of improv, tons of talking. And on the last day, we had a break, and everyone's still chit-chatting. And I went outside and just realized I had had enough with talking. I had been doing improv and catching up with people and just living with these people for a weekend. And I hit my max. And I feel like I finally had a little bit of a glimpse into my partner, Claire. She's a highly sensitive person. And, sometimes my daughters just it's too loud in this house. And we have a very kind of open concept house, which, as I look at more, I'm like, I kind of like how 60s houses were kind of separated out. That would be a little quieter here. But it feels like I just barely am kind of dipping my toes more into seeing the world through, just a little different set of eyes. And I say that because we have a really amazing therapist with us here today. April Snow is an LMFT and is a licensed psychotherapist, author, consultant, and podcast host in the San Francisco Bay Area of California. She specializes in working with highly sensitive people to help calm the storm of overwhelm, anxiety, and self-doubt to allow their innate sensitive strengths to shine through. Deeply committed to changing the narrative of what it means to be highly sensitive, April has created and led HSP workshops all over the country, as well as online through her Sensitive School. In addition to Find Your Strength, a workbook for the highly sensitive person, she's written Mindfulness Workbook for Stress Relief and the Empowered Highly Sensitive Person Self-Care Journal. April, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm so excited to have you here.
I could not agree more. I'm so excited to have you here as well. And mostly just because I want to pick your brain about highly sensitive people and apply it to my life, and people can listen in.
I love that. And I loved your personal share, and that you're starting to see how sensitivity is showing up in your own life with your family.
Yeah, well, even just looking at, my partner and, having these discussions around, she doesn't live with me and my girls yet. And that's the conversation we've been having. And, she with her therapist has talked through, well, what would I need in that life? She doesn't have kids. She's got a dog. She can go back to her cute little cottage on the water. It's why would you leave that, especially as an HSP?
Exactly.
And so we'll get into all that. But I want to just start with, tell us about how you got into the work of working with sensitive people.
Sure. So it was definitely started as a personal journey, as a lot of our work does as therapists. I was in graduate school and I was doing a research project on introversion and attachment, trying to find more about myself and why I see the world the way I do. And I was out to lunch with a classmate, and they said, "Have you heard about this trait, high sensitivity? Have you heard of Dr. Elaine Aron's work?" Who she's the person that kind of kicked all this off. And I said, "No, I haven't. Tell me more." And it just started from there. And I immersed myself, read all the books. Thankfully, Elaine Aron is in the Bay Area with me, and I went to workshops and dug into the research. And I realized I need to specialize in supporting HSPs because this is what I needed to know in my own life. Because it really does, when you're highly sensitive, it touches every part of your life, right? It's the lens you see the world through, it's how your nervous system works. So I just really have immersed myself ever since over the past decade. And it's been incredibly meaningful work.
Mm. So awesome. So then let's kind of talk about some of those general terms just to make sure the
Yeah.
listeners are on the same page. You know, we may have heard these terms on Instagram or TikTok or just people
Hmm.
in conversation saying HSP. What do we need to undo? Like, what are misconceptions?
Yes.
And then what do we need to retrain people to kind of think about, understand, and like rebuild that? So, like, let's tear it down
Mm.
and then let's rebuild it.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So, misconceptions, when we hear the word sensitive, of course, we think about folks that are hypersensitive, maybe emotionally sensitive, who have gone through trauma, who are dysregulated. And that's what we associate with high sensitivity, but they're actually two different things. We have sensitive, but then we have the trait of high sensitivity, which is otherwise known as sensory processing sensitivity in the research. So we need to understand that sensitive people are actually, we're really productive and creative and empathetic and insightful when we're regulated. But what we often see is the dysregulated HSPs in the world. Those are showing up more loudly and what we kind of stereotype an HSP to be. But 30% of people in the world are highly sensitive or born with this trait. And we don't notice most of them. They blend in. They're leading really well balanced, productive lives. It's just the highly sensitive folks who've been through trauma, who are chronically stressed or dysregulated, that we see the most. So that's the misconception, right? That we're equating high sensitivity with hypersensitivity.
Mm. Yeah. What other misconceptions should we drill into first?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you touched on being an extrovert. I think we assume that high sensitivity is the same as introversion. It's not.
Mhm.
30% of HSPs are extroverted. So they have to kind of balance that need for more social stimulation, novelty, with being more easily overwhelmed or overstimulated because we're so perceptive and empathetic. Also, we assume that only women can be sensitive. Also not true. You see sensitivity equally in folks of all genders because we need sensitive folks in those different realms. What else? We think of high sensitivity as a mental health issue. It's not. It's a temperament trait. It's something you're born with. And if you think about it at the core, there's an evolutionary advantage to having people in your population that notice little details, notice the dangers, remember what foods are safe to eat or not, who notice when folks need something emotionally, who notice the subtle body language or the nuances, which make HSPs great therapists, among other careers. So there's actually a lot of gifts that sensitive people bring to the world. We just don't notice them. We notice when HSPs are bothering us, right? Like, oh, they're so sensitive, they're so emotional, they're so needy, they're, so reactive. But really, the sensitive folks are the people who are the most empathetic, justice minded, intuitive problem solvers, big thinkers. So we often get just the trait itself wrong. We think of it as a mental health issue, a weakness, when it's actually a gift that can balance out the less sensitive folks, the more extroverted folks in our society. We need all of that, right? At the table.
Yeah. So what are some ways or what are some things that we really need to kind of understand in regards to more sensitive people? Like what are the I don't know, 5 pillars that you wish every therapist knew or
Mhm.
kind of the big picture, just make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, I would think about the HSP's experience in the world. So, being highly sensitive, the core of the trait is something called depth of processing, which it's not the emotional sensitivity, which we are more emotional, we are more empathetic naturally, we have more active mirror neurons. The emotional centers of our brains are more active, but also the emotional processing or the Information processing centers are also more active. So we tend to need more time to pause, to reflect, to move from one thing to the next, to make decisions. So that can often be misperceived. And even just when you're sitting with a client in session, how can you support them in that? How can you help them settle in? How can you give them space to process in the session, whether that's doing a creative activity, whether that's letting them journal for a moment, whether that's slowing them down and helping them think through something before moving on to the next piece, and then helping them regulate their nervous systems, right? We need those tools to help us understand the impact of overstimulation, because we are more impacted at a subtle level. So there's this piece of sensitivity called differential susceptibility, which essentially means we're more impacted by the negative, but we're also more impacted by the positive. So can we help regulate, but also can we help amp up the things that positively influence us? I like to talk about meaningful self-care. Like, what do you do that lights you up, that, really fuels you? And are you doing that on a regular basis? So we need time to kind of fill our cups, but also to empty out all the emotions and the information that we're absorbing throughout our day-to-day experience. So it's really just tuning in, making sure HSPs are able to be kind of in their natural rhythm of taking time to notice, to process, to digest, to regulate. Yeah, there's so much I
Mhm.
could say.
Well, and I think that, when you look at just our general society, how
Mhm.
hard that can be because it's like, just
Yes.
being an adult takes just like, I'm a single dad, have,
Mhm.
primary custody of my kids, and it's like just all that there is in a day to do. Yeah, and I don't have high sensitivity.
Mhm.
It just feels overwhelming. And so then it's like then on top of that to say maybe I need to work less, maybe I need to have more downtime, maybe I need
I
to not
know.
have as much social time. Maybe I need to go to yoga 2 times a week or meditate or whatever the things are to feel
Yeah.
really balanced. And then it's like, well, then that person may have to be working fewer hours, so they're making less money. And then it's like all the narratives of productivity. Like, I mean, it just
Mhm.
feels like it becomes a jumble pretty quickly. So,
It
like,
really
what
does, doesn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah, go ahead.
And yeah, and I think you made a good point that even the non-HSPs are more overstimulated and overwhelmed these days, right? There's a lot coming at us, whether it be work or family responsibilities or social media or just all the input that we're taking in. It's a lot to process. And when you're highly sensitive, you're noticing everything at such a subtle level and you're more impacted. So we do need kind of a less is more quality over quantity approach to life, and it can be hard. HSPs really struggle with that, because we want to make sure everyone else is okay, because when others are disappointed or upset, we're disappointed or upset. We feel that. So we often stretch ourselves way beyond our limits, and guilt is something that a lot of HSPs struggle with because of that. I see a direct correlation with guilt and empathy. The more empathetic you are, the more guilt you deal with, and it gets in the way of setting boundaries and taking care of yourself and saying no to more work or to more social time, or maybe, seeing family less, but actually enjoying the experience more. It's tough, right? You want to keep up with everyone else, but we're not wired like everyone else. We really need to look inward. I'm always reminding my clients, turn the dial back in, right? Look at your own compass. Do not look outward to make decisions about how to live your life. And of course, we still need to go to work and we still want to be in our relationships. Relationships are incredibly meaningful to us, but we do need to do less of it. Have more sleep, have more processing and reflection time, more downtime, have more time for self care. It's hard being an HSP in a busy, overstimulated world, for sure. I won't minimize that. But when we take good care of ourselves, we can show up fully. It
Mm.
just looks a little differently.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. So when I think about my kids who, it's hard to know, at ages 10 and 13, how much of it's
Mhm.
just like brain development and how much of
Sure.
it is being genuinely like a highly sensitive person, or with my partner. When you think about just like a regular family home,
Mhm.
what needs improvement in that setting to help an HSP feel most grounded, feel like they can kind of be the best version of themselves?
Yes. A lot of times we don't understand the HSP experience, and it could be HSPs or not. I think we need a lot more space. So can we take just a breath before eating breakfast and running out the door, right? Can there just be 30 seconds of transition time? Like, okay, I'm just gonna get up from the table slowly. I'm gonna take a moment to sit and then put my shoes on versus like go, 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 go. And I know it's hard, right? There's so much going on, so many moving pieces, especially if you have multiple children and everyone's got a different schedule and timeline and set of needs. If we can just have a little bit of space somewhere, and maybe that could be a family activity. Okay, after dinner, we all take 30 minutes to read or to watch something or to do a puzzle or to do an activity, just kind of building in that self-care time can be really important, that quiet space to normalize that it's okay to need some space for yourself. And it can be really hard if you're an HSP kiddo in a highly extroverted, maybe high sensation seeking, very busy family. You can feel really like an outsider, so can we normalize some of that? And also validation, when you're not highly sensitive, it's so hard to understand the lived experience of an HSP who is feeling so incredibly deeply over everything, not just the highs, not just the lows, but also the highs. You might be like, why are you so excited about this? Why are you so into this, activity or interest? Um, or why are you so upset about this little thing, that your shoe's dirty or that, someone looked at you this way or, oh, I'm speaking a normal tone, but you think I'm yelling. It's just we perceive everything at such a different volume. And so having a little bit of validation for that, like, oh, this must be hard. I see that you're struggling. That can go a long way because I see adults in my practice every week who are still carrying the burden of those misperceptions as adults.
Mm,
Constantly being told your experience is not right, it's not accurate, you're over exaggerating, and there's that self doubt. It seeds in so deeply, and it's so hard to undo. And it's so hard to then trust yourself when you are having a different experience because your nervous system and your brain is wired differently than
mm.
70% of the population. So, having some space, having a little bit of understanding, just trying to enter into those HSPs worlds that you live with,
Mm.
being curious and not making any assumptions.
And April, if you were to kind of take that and apply it to couples, so what do
Mhm.
effective couples that have one person that's highly sensitive and one that's not, what do effective couples do to have the best relationship and to honor kind of both of their differences?
Yeah, I think it's understanding that you make a great pair. Having an HSP and a non-HSP is a great complement because then you have the person who is noticing the little details, who's being the emotional leader in the relationship, who's being more empathetic, who's taking care of like, oh, the gift giving and just the little nuances and making the house feel beautiful and special. And then you have the other one who's a little bit more ready to just make the quick decision, take quick action, kind of be more outward facing. So I would hope that you're able to see what each brings to the table and that how you kind of fill in each other's gaps, right? And just having
Mm,
respect and reverence for what you each bring and not saying, well, you don't do this or you don't do that, but saying, oh, thank you for taking care of that. And really noticing because a lot of times I have HSPs in my practice who just feel really underappreciated in the relationship. Like, oh, I'm really making sure that the house is beautiful when we have guests over, or I'm taking care of these little details, or making sure holidays and birthdays feel special, or I'm really there when my partner's going through an emotionally difficult time, or I'm anticipating their needs before they even know they need it, because we can kind of tune in to those little subtle body language or like details And then also for the HSP partner to understand, like, oh, your partner really is driving you, right? Maybe getting you out to do more, to be more adventurous, um, who's kind of filling in the gaps when maybe you're having a really hard day and you've been overwhelmed for a long time. So I mean,
Mm.
it makes such a great team. So I just hope that folks can really appreciate that in each other.
Yeah. And how do couples manage the dynamic that I think is frequent of maybe the non highly sensitive person kind of saying, "Well, this is what's normal in the world," and then the
Mm,
sensitive person being like, "But this is my reality." And like, I mean, that seems like a tightrope walk for any couple to have any
yeah.
difference of opinion. Um, but like, how do effective couples manage that?
It is a tightrope walk, isn't it? To kind of enter into each other's world. I think staying curious, right? And I like to use a lot of analogies. Like if you're, so let's say the non HSP partner can understand that you feel easily overstimulated. Take an example where they feel overstimulated and then just help them bring them into your world. So when you feel this at work, when this is happening, that's how I feel every day, or that's how I feel at a much lesser level, and just help them understand your world. And the opposite can be true also. 'Cause sometimes the non HSP partner can feel held back when the HSP partner needs more time at home or needs things to go a little bit more slowly. So just understanding that we each have different needs, and can we have some permission to each go our own way a little bit of the time, right? We want to have that shared experience, of course. That's such an important foundation for couples. But also, can we meet our needs separately as well? I think there has to be some room for that because your HSP partner is not always going to be able to keep up with you. They're going to need more downtime. They're going to need more sleep. They're going to need more time for reflection. And
Mm.
the non-HSP partner is gonna need more excitement and socializing and novelty. So we might need to go our own kind of meet our own needs and then come back together more than another couple would need to do. And that's okay, right?
Yeah. Now I want to shift to the therapists out there that
Mm,
identify as
yeah.
HSPs. So tell me a little bit more about maybe what they haven't been taught. Maybe we need to do some kind of permission giving, and
Mhm.
then how to kind of optimize their practice around being highly sensitive.
Yeah, it's true that we often haven't been given the permissions we need a sensitive therapist. And again, we're trying to keep up. See 5 to 7 clients a day, work 5 days a week, plus do the networking and, be on social media and do all the things. And we really have to give ourselves permission to, again, turn that, focus back inward, ask yourself, what do I need? What does my practice look like ideally? And that will probably mean seeing fewer clients or spacing your sessions out more, or maybe doing more kind of introvert friendly marketing. So for me, I've done really well showing up on social media and writing blogs and books. And I have done less networking, or I'm meeting folks one to one versus going to big events. Um, so, what works for you? We really need permission for that. That there's many ways to be a therapist. There's many ways to set up a practice. There's many ways to market yourself, especially today. We have so many options, as I know you know, and the therapist that you work with. So, really optimize the practice based on your own needs. Look inward. How do you want to work? When do you want to work? Who do you want to work with? Where do you want to work? These are all questions to ask and check in with yourself and ask yourself, what do I need? Not what are all the other therapists in my area or in my network doing? It's really important.
Yeah, I think that I mean that's true of even non-HSP therapists, but
Absolutely.
in particular, like when I look at my schedule, I want to walk my daughters to school every morning.
Yes.
My sister lives in the same neighborhood, so we walk with the nieces. So that means the earliest I will ever work on a school day is 9:30, and
Yes.
I want to walk down and I want to pick them up every day. So that means the latest that I will work if I'm going to be running to the school is 3:45. I'd rather
Mhm.
be 3:30. So that then determines when I work. And so if someone's like, "Hey, can you do a 7 p.m. podcast interview?" Unless it's an opportunity that I'm like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely need that person on the show, or I definitely need to be on that show," it's probably going to be a no. And so
Yeah.
I think that it's starting to work towards like just what is your ideal practice is really
Yes.
helpful for highly sensitive therapists. What are other things like in regards to like I think about like the pace I did when I owned my counseling practice, I was just like, I want to get out of here. I don't want to like waste any time. And so I did like sessions on the 45 minutes, and then I would
Mhm.
take like a 15-minute break every 3 sessions. So it was like insane, like total sprint. That's still how I work, where it's like, if I'm going to work, I want to work.
Yes.
For most therapists that are highly sensitive, what do their schedules look like?
Yeah, and I appreciate you knowing that about yourself, right? A lot of therapists like that momentum and to have that condensed version of a schedule so you have more time. But you're right that it's important to think about what works for me. And so for a lot of sensitive therapists, and this isn't always practical, but 10 to 12 sessions a week is the sweet spot for us. And for the last decade, that is the most popular answer when I poll highly sensitive therapists. 10 to 12 sessions a week with 15 to 30 minutes between sessions. Now, there will be highly sensitive therapists who are more extroverted, who are more high sensation seeking, where that just doesn't work. They're going to be more like you where they want some momentum. But then there will need to be a counterbalance of time at the end of the week or on the weekend where they really get to recharge. But generally speaking, 10 to 12 sessions a week, private pay with 15 to 30 minutes with a day off, probably at the end of the week, is going to be ideal.
Mm.
Because you
So
need
then if we
that
just run those
time.
numbers, if we just say
Yeah.
like 12 sessions a week times say 48 weeks a year, that's
Mm-hmm.
576 sessions. If you want to gross, say 100,000 divided by 576, you
Mm-hmm.
have to be charging at least
That's right.
$173.61. So,
That's
and
right.
that's 100,000 gross. If you take off taxes and
Yep.
expenses,
Mm-hmm.
you might be doing like 60 grand. And so then
Mm-hmm.
that's where a lot of those kind of things around the practice, well, who am I attracting? If I'm a highly sensitive therapist, how do you market to that community? How do you
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you differentiate yourself? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how do you, I mean, if you're private pay doing 12 sessions a week, what are things that therapists can be doing to make that achievable?
Yeah, I think there's a few pieces here. One is definitely you want to have a niche and you want to really define yourself. That has been such a game changer for me. I niched early. I became well known even before I was licensed in my niche around high sensitivity. So my practice was just hit the ground running once I got my license. And so I really think being known for something specific is really helpful because then you will be able to charge more. And you can also counterbalance those higher fees because we're very empathetic people. We want to create accessibility with maybe some sliding scale spots. And then, so having a strong niche, being well known in that niche, and doing other things outside your practice to spread the word about that niche through blogging or podcasting or being on social media, however you want to show up, doing workshops, but then also potentially having something that you do in addition to your therapy work, which is something that I've always done, which could be consulting, it could be teaching, it could be doing something completely unrelated. A lot of therapists will support other therapists behind the scenes. So there's lots of options there, depending on what your interests are and your passions are. But those
Mm.
are just some ways. Because I don't want therapists to think I have to be underpaid. I have to be destitute, right? There are lots of ways to have a create balance as a therapist. And maybe you just not just, but maybe you solely focus on therapy, but you'd see 15 clients a week, right? And you have it be that be your main focus. But just know that there are other options, and I think we now have a lot of models for that. That there are many ways to be therapeutic, right? Not just being one-to-one sessions, doing groups, being an expert, showing up in other ways in your field.
Mm. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what
Mm,
would you want them to know?
that's a great question. Just going back to what we've said, which is consider your own needs when making decisions about your practice. When, how, where, who do you want to work with? And just reminding yourself that what's good for you is good for your clients. It's not selfish.
So awesome. April, if people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, where should we send them?
Absolutely. If you're a therapist, you can go to sensitivetherapist.com. There I have a free workshop, 3 pillars of a sustainable practice, which we dive into screening clients, creating spacious schedules, setting boundaries in your practice. And then if you're not a therapist or you just want more HSP resources, I have a ton of resources at sensitivestrengths.com.
So awesome. Thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much, Joe. It was great talking with you.
Well, go check out those resources, and just knowing what a high percentage of therapists are sensitive therapists. Take that time for yourself. Work with those clients, dig in, learn extra things as part of just creating this business that's thriving, but that you actually love, that you love showing up within it. Also, we couldn't do the show without our amazing sponsors. Today's sponsor is Therapy Notes. Therapy Notes is the best EHR, the best electronic health records out there. You can find out more over at therapynotes.com. Use promo code Joe at checkout. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.